Hello everyone, welcome to another Nap Chat. I'm Caleb, this is Johanna, and we are working through what the Bible has to say, how it applies to our life in the modern world, specifically from the perspective of two young parents, and we're hoping that it's beneficial to you. And if you're finding this beneficial, why don't you let somebody know that you find it beneficial, like the video, leave us a comment if you have a question, we'd be glad to hear from you. So what are we going to talk about today?
Today we're going to talk about raising daughters because, well, we have daughters, and so I don't really know too much about raising sons. But specifically, not just like the day in, day out, but where are we going? Where are we aiming our daughters to? What are we raising them to be? And I think we talked a little bit about in the last video about raising them to be moms. And I just think that's a really interesting idea just because when God created us, Adam named the woman Eve, and that means mother. And so just the idea that we are mothers, like that's the most unique thing about our identity, and whether we're actually a mom or whether we have mothering abilities in different ways, this ability to nurture or care, I just think that's such an interesting thing, and fostering that and growing that. So I just wanted to ask a few questions in relation to that. So the first one is, can women do everything? While we might specifically be designed to be moms, can we do everything? From a biblical lens, what would you say to that?
Yeah, probably two ways to answer that depending on what you're asking. Are women capable of doing everything? I think to some extent you can answer that question, yes, right? Like women are equally gifted spiritually by the Holy Spirit to do the things that are good deeds that God has prepared in advance for us to do. Yeah. There are certainly, in general, physical limitations on women that aren't necessarily the same for men, right? But those things are a very small fraction of the actual activities of a human being.
Right.
So in a certain sense, no, they can't do everything. But I think in general, the way most people ask that question, they are capable of everything, certainly. I mean, I think that's pretty clear from just seeing how God uses both men and women to accomplish his will in the Bible.
Right. I think I'm asking, I get what you're saying, and I completely agree with it. I really think women are able to do a lot of the jobs or roles or things that men do. Not all of them, not the same way necessarily, but they're able to accomplish them, sometimes better, sometimes worse, depends on the woman, on the position. But I was more so asking in the, should we be doing everything? I hear things like, well, we need to have just as many scientists or just as many, I don't know, just these positions, like the CEOs and all of that sort of thing. Like we need to have as many women in those roles as men, and this is important for women's rights and for showing that women can do these things, giving women the opportunity to do these things. And it's just important to not treat a woman like a doormat. So therefore, we should be able to do all of these things. And what would your thoughts be to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a messy question because I think there are two extreme views that probably don't completely comport with a biblical worldview. So on the one hand, you have the view that we should just allow people to, do whatever they want, and whoever can be the best to fit into this position, then they should just have that position, whatever it is. Yeah. The reason I think that doesn't comport with the Christian worldview is, first of all, the metrics by which a organization or a company decides to grow, like what they say, well, this is what we want to do better. Those are conditioned by a number of things, and those factors may not be necessarily with the input of half of the population of women, right? So if a man starts a company, a man has a certain way that this is going to look. He is coming at how this company is supposed to look from maybe an exclusively male worldview, and he hasn't brought women in. And that doesn't mean that he has to have a woman who's on his board or necessarily have her in any one position, but he is a man. He's going to think like a man. Mm-hmm. God says it is not good for men to be alone. They should have women with them, working with them, sharing their perspective, all of these sorts of things. So if you have a company that is started with an essentially male worldview, it is going to attract and reward men as it tries to accomplish the metrics that it sets for itself, right? So for example, an easy one, and the psychology bears this out, so I'm not talking from a biblical perspective on this, but in general, men care more about things like success and money, where women care more about things like unity and communication. Right? Mm-hmm. And so if you are a company that has got a more male-centered worldview, you're going to push for metrics like how are our shares doing, right? Or what were our sales this last year? More so than you might push for something like, do we have a positive work environment?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you just have a system that just says free for all, anybody do whatever they want, you're going to generally get more companies started by men, because men tend to be more driven to be creative entrepreneur types.
Okay.
Those companies are going to be necessarily started by men. They're going to have male worldviews and therefore are not going to be as attractive or encouraging or empowering of women.
Sure.
Just de facto. This is just how it's going to work. And so there has to be a certain push against that worldview that says, let's include women. Not because they're necessarily going to hit all of our metrics exactly the way we want to, but because there is something that is beautiful about both men and women working together. So that side, that's one side of it. Sorry for making this complex.
No, that's good. Yeah. All right. And
the other side of it is the what would probably be described as like a hyper-feminist worldview, which is like we have to have complete equality in everything. There have to be as many women CEOs, millionaires, whatever, as there are men. And that just simply doesn't work because men and women are gifted differently, right?
Yeah.
And so what a man might be good at and what a woman might be good at, or what they might be drawn to as a positive career path, those things are going to just be different. And therefore you almost necessarily can't find complete equality in how many people are in each of those positions, and therefore you do lose some of the performance.
So what I like better about your first way of looking at it is it's saying we want women in these positions because you are valuable, and I just love the acknowledgement of like there's just something so beautiful that women add into these things. Like that view of seeing me as uniquely valuable and not just we want you because you hit our metrics, which is a rather cold way of looking at it. And if you're putting me in a position just because, well, we need more women in the position, that kind of hurts. Well,
Right, and so the feminist movement, I mean, for all the negative things I could say about it, it has done many positive things, and one of those is forcing us to reckon with this idea that men and women are different and that women bring something that is valuable to the workplace, the society in general. How they go about it is where I have an issue, but I'm totally on board with the idea that, okay, we need to have women around supporting, conversing, even leading in some of these scenarios because of just the nature of whatever the position is.
Right. Oh man, I have so many things I could say on that. Like even just with healthcare, like bringing children into the world, like midwifery and all that stuff. I'm not going to go into it, but it's just there's lots to think of there, and the implications of having women in different areas of the workforce or in a school or whatever the thing may be. It's really great. But rather than looking at the top down, can we look bottom up, like just an individual as they're going up? Our daughters, how should they? How do we want them to think about growing up? Do we want them shooting that I want to be the CEO, or I want to add women value in a workplace, or I want to be a mom? How do you get them to think about all of that in the context of what a biblical woman is, and with the idea that they are created for uniquely as women?
Right. So I think we touched this before in other videos, but one of the biggest disservices we've done to our younger generations is give them this question: what do you want to be when you grow up?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's just a very common question that we ask, and 97%, I would 99% of people who ask the question don't mean anything by it, but they don't realize what they are subtly doing to a child's worldview, which is to say, what you are is not good enough. And in a sense, we would agree with that. Like, you're a child, you shouldn't be operating heavy machinery or something like this. But that who you are already is not, it does not have the capacity to be something valuable, right? You have to go and become something, right? So we've kind of put on them this idea: unless you perform, unless you be something that you aren't already, then you're not as valuable.
Yeah, one person lovingly said to our girls, like, what do you want to be? Do you want to be the prime minister, the president? Like, what are you going to be? Like, and you know, with little kids, it's kind of cute, but it's also over time, like, what great thing will I do? How am I going to make a mark on this world? How am I going to be great? And this idea of greatness, I think, is really perpetuated in society of you must be great somehow, in some way, make yourself meaningful outside in the world where people notice. And right now, actually, a really popular one is, this is funny, YouTube influencer kind of thing. We're on YouTube, so it's kind of funny. But that's a way that people want to be great. And when I grow up, I'm going to be great, you need to be great. And I think that's interesting that we put that on our children, on our women, on boys as well, though, too.
Yeah, certainly. And Like, in a sense, that it's okay to say we want you to push for excellence and hard work and ethics in who you are growing up to be, but we can't divorce that from you already have inherent value.
Yeah.
Right now you have inherent value, and if you were to do nothing with your life, you would have inherent value. If you lived in my basement for the rest of your life, you would have inherent value, and I would love you and I would be proud of you because God baptized you and God feeds you his supper and continues to call you his own. That is enough value.
Yeah.
So if I am coming from a place of who I am is already valuable in Christ, then how I see myself playing out my role in the world is far less about reaching for something and more about seeing what are the resources and opportunities that are around me and how can I maximize those things. And the easiest one, and this has been true throughout all of human history, is my body. That's my number one resource, right? It is the thing that I have control of. It has capacities. I may not have money, I may not have influence, I may not have resources of any other sort, but I have my body, doggone it. And that, of course, can lead into some really bad places, such as like prostitution, for example, but it can also lead into some really good places when women and men too, but women particularly for this conversation, are given the inherent value of saying, you matter, therefore use your body for what it has been made to do.
On that vein, it like the idea of like reaching a status versus just saying, I have this time, I have resources is what you were saying, but like there's only so much you can do. Like you could aim for any number of goals, but then like what are you giving up in that time? You cannot do everything. And I think a lot of women have been sold this lie where you can hit like every dream job, every goal mark, and be what men can be or whatever, be that thing, and you can have this family and be this mom who's nurturing and loving and have the energy and capacity for it all, and you can do it all, and you can have all the fun vacations, and you can do this all before you hit your 40s or something like that. And it's just the idea of getting all of that in and reaching all of your goals. It's unlikely, and it's a lot of pressure, and then you see online all the time all these women who are burnt out and the women are doing most of the housework and holding down a full-time job. This is so unfair. And I'm like, yeah, that is unfair. And why are they, why is everyone trying to do it all and have everything? It seems very unlikely. And instead of burning yourself out, doing too many things, stretching too thin, saying, what are the priorities here? And I think you can do a lot of things. God blesses us in many ways throughout our life. So you can actually hit a lot of goals in your 80 years, but also what are those goals? I think it's just interesting to inspect. But I think the idea of using your body, having children, it's just such an easy way. Like I'm serving all day long as a mom, and there's no out from it. So I think that's really beautiful. But I think even outside of that, even if you're not a mother, I mean, I've got single friends, and the idea of teaching or taking other people in who need you, who need your listening ear, who need your support and love, I think that is such a beautiful gift that a lot of women, not all, are given in different ways. But regardless, our bodies are just beautiful ways to serve in that way.
Yeah, to simplify the woman to just childbearing, right, or child rearing,
right,
is far too simplistic.
But that's why I like the idea of mothering, which is more than just like I mother my 2-year-old, but mothering other people and bringing along other people, which the whole Bible talks about. The Bible talks about bringing the younger women with you, and whoever the younger woman might be, if they're 3 years younger than you, 20 years younger than you, bringing them along, mothering them. I think that's really beautiful.
Certainly, yeah. And so to push back to what you said previous to that, like the reason I think a lot of people in general, but particularly women in our generation, are pressed into this idea of I have to do all these things, is they are living up to the standard or the expectations of something other than God, right? So whether it is their parents' expectation, or it is their Instagram's expectation, or it's their classmates' expectations, or it's the expectations of some boy that they like, or whatever it is, like they are trying to live up to a certain set of expectations that they believe that if they would reach those expectations, then they would be acceptable, happy, appreciated, whatever. Yeah. And to the extent to which we can cut people off from that, and show them what they have in Jesus, which is all the acceptance and all the affection and all the acknowledgement and all the value that they ever could want, they're actually going to back off from pushing themselves so far. They're going to fall back into a better sense of balance, because they're going to be able to say, I can rest and not do whatever the thing is. I can afford to not give 100% on this task. I can afford to give 80% on this task because that's just what I have and what I can do. Or I can afford to not have this part of my time or this part of my life filled up with this. You can cut things off and say, I'm just not going to do that at all anymore.
The thing is,
you have to be free in order to be able to make those types of decisions. Otherwise, you're enslaved.
Right. I think what's challenging is when we strip back all of those things, a lot of times if you are, especially if you're a mom, what's left is doing a lot of dishes, doing a lot of diaper changes, dealing with a lot of tantrums and tears, and that does not feel spectacular. And so if I take away all of the extra things, I'm just doing that, and the appreciation maybe is my husband and probably not my children. And so it's a very thankless task. And I remember growing up, my dad speaking so highly of what my mom did. I'm like, yeah, mom's great. But I think because of outside influences, I never actually thought it was that great. Like, what does she do? She does dishes. But like looking back on it, she was our support. She was the one, if you come home with a broken heart or a broken leg, she's the one with you, taking care of you, staying up with you, whatever the thing may be. The mom is this constant, steady, I mean, she wasn't perfect, but she was lovely. But just looking at that now, oh wow, the way that she supported our entire family was beautiful. And I definitely underrated that. And so it's something I want to do the same thing my parents did, but for some reason it didn't stick with me. So I'm like, how do I do it better than they did, so that our kids actually think, wow, it's so beautiful to support and serve other people and lay down your life for other people for the betterment of the family and society. Child, understand this, that this is important. I just don't know how you get that into them. There's not TV shows that are showing this.
Right. Yeah, I would say two factors probably play loudest in my mind, which is entertainment and then community, right? So I feel like maybe many of my abilities to raise children come from the fact that I had a sister who was 6 years younger than me. And so in definitely vivid living memories for me, I have, watching my mom take care of my baby sister as an infant. I never had to change diapers. I don't think you should let your 7-year-old change diapers, but you could, I suppose. But I got to read to her. Like in a sense, I basically taught my sister to read. And so like I had a lot of these sort of motherly type experiences.
That's really cool.
As a 6-year-old, not every family, of course, is going to be able to have enough children over enough time period to give every single one of their children the experience of raising their younger siblings. And of course, there's always a baby of the family who can't. But then that allows for community of other friends, other parents to be around and to make what we're all doing together in raising children. Some people would say it takes a village, right? A valuable skill for all of us to have. The second part of it is entertainment, right? And because as a culture, we generally live for the next bit of entertainment rather than to say, how can I see my purpose as adding value to other people's lives, as blessing other people rather than just being constantly blessed as I consume whatever it is that I consume. Not to say entertainment is absolutely wrong, but it's kind of an addiction for our culture. Like if you have that as your family culture, like you're not going to pursue, okay, how can I be happy? How can I reach my goals? How can I be successful? Because I've already just been living in this world of, well, the reason I exist is to help my family. The reason I exist is to help my community. The reason I exist is to help my church, whatever, go on from there.
Well, even looking back at things I watched, like, I don't know, things on Disney Channel or whatever growing up, the parents were often fools on there. They were like the jokes of the conversations, and the kids were the ones who got it. So they weren't exactly something to aim for. These kids were going off to go do big things or whatever it was. And so you didn't necessarily want to there wasn't the cycle of, I'm going to one day be one of those adults. You're like, I don't want to be like that. And so just that whole idea makes you think, well, that's not what I'm going to be. I might ride off into the sunset with a boy someday, but I'm not, the idea of rearing children, even though it was encouraged, and I guess I liked the idea of having babies, the idea of I want to serve my life, lay down my life for children, that's really foreign.
Yeah, and I know we've touched this in other places, and it's probably worth a longer conversation at some point, but I just think we have to be honest about the power that screens have in our life. The Bible talks about household idols as being something that was destructive on God's people. And what were the household idols? So they were just little things around the house that people could look to give them inspiration for whatever we're doing, or give them some feeling of comfort. Well, what do most families on this continent do every single night? They go and place their faces in front of a screen that is going to give them some inspiration, make them feel good for a little while. And what does it do? It teaches them something that's contrary to God's word. And while the writers of these shows and the directors may not necessarily be trying to rip your children away from you or from God, Satan is. And Satan works in all of these things. Satan was not in the household gods, but he definitely used them. So we just got to be careful about anything that's not God's word and say, put this in its right place.
Right. So how different is this than an idol? So in high school and in college, it was pretty common for girls to put up pictures of girls on their wall who had like the body type they wanted as inspiration. So, and then there'd be like next to it, like work hard, 10 crunches every hour or something, whatever the thing was, and then there was a picture of the perfect ideal body up on the wall. That's what I'm aiming for. And like that, how's that different than the, like if you had a goddess of beauty in your house, is there any difference there?
No, I don't think I can.
And like it's the same idea back in the old days. They'd worship God, but they'd also have their idols, and they'd do both, and it's probably the same.
Yeah, and I think we just have to keep asking ourselves, where does the Bible say that that's good?
Right.
Right. Like, where does the Bible say that whatever is the standard of beauty at this point is good?
Right.
I think the Bible has some things to say, and it is necessarily silent on certain things.
Right.
And so let's just look at these things and say, that's a lie. And let's be bold enough to say that's a lie. Let's not try to whitewash it and make it seem like it's okay, they're just kids. It's a lie.
Yeah.
And let's call it that.
Right. Well, there's so many shows that kids watch too, where the women do have these ideal body figures, or they're off doing something amazing, and it's not encouraging motherhood at all. They're laying down your life, or I mean, it might be encouraging some good gifts, but rarely is it doing it in the proper context. Usually it's just missing a huge chunk. So unless you're discussing it with your kids and putting it in a godly light, it can be harmful.
Paul says physical training is of some value. That means it's of some value. But there are things that are more important than that.
Yeah. Oh man, I just want to hide my children from all of it.
And on that note, we're going to be putting our children in a bunker. So tune in next time.
If you don't see them anytime soon.
Thanks for joining us on this episode. We'd be glad to hear any comments that you have. Please put them in the comment section, and hopefully we'll get to them if you do put anything there. I hope you join us next time.